Have you ever found yourself lying awake at night, wondering how the child you once held in your arms, the one you fed, raised, sacrificed for, somehow became so distant? Maybe they're cold, dismissive. Maybe they only call when they need something. Or worse, they don't call at all. And no matter what you do, it feels like you're walking on eggshells just to keep the peace. You tiptoe around their mood. You keep quiet about your needs. You give and you give and you give, hoping for just a little warmth in return. But it never seems to come, does it? If that sounds familiar, I want you to know something. You are not alone. Thousands of parents, especially mothers over 60, quietly carry this weight. They feel heartbroken, disrespected, and sometimes even invisible. But here's the hardest part. Many of them blame themselves. They think, did I do something wrong? Did I not love them enough? Should I have been more understanding? And they keep trying to fix things by being nicer, more patient, more forgiving. But nothing changes. Here's the truth no one wants to say out loud. Your adult child is not responding to your kindness because they are not operating from the heart. They are operating from something far more complicated and far more fragile than that. They're acting from the ego. And until you understand how the ego works and how to position yourself in relation to it, you will stay stuck in this painful cycle. Now, when I say ego, I don't mean arrogance or pride in the usual sense. The ego is the part of us that craves control, power, validation. It's deeply insecure underneath, but it wears the mask of confidence. Your adult child's ego, especially if they're disrespectful or dismissive, isn't really looking for love. It's looking for dominance. It wants to know it has emotional control over you, that you'll always be there, no matter how they act, that you need their approval and that they don't need yours. That's the brutal truth. But here comes the empowering part. Once you see this clearly, you can change the game. Not by confronting them, not by arguing, and definitely not by begging for their attention. You change the game through something far more powerful. Your strength, your silence, and your emotional self-control. Let me ask you something. How many times have you forgiven them quickly, even when their words hurt you deeply? How many times have you made excuses for them? They're just busy. They're under stress. They don't mean it. But deep down, you knew you were being disrespected. You knew the relationship was one-sided. And yet, you stayed quiet. You tried harder. You reached out again. Why? Because as a mother, and especially one who grew up in a generation where sacrifice was expected, you believed that love means loyalty no matter what. That love is shown by sticking around even when you're hurting. But that kind of love, when given to someone who's operating from ego, doesn't heal the relationship. It actually feeds the imbalance. Let's be clear. Your adult child may not even realize they're doing this. The ego isn't evil. It's just scared. It wants to feel important. And when it senses that it's being fed, by your over-explaining, your apologizing, your eagerness to please, it swells. It gets stronger, but it never gets satisfied. It just takes more. That's why your efforts haven't been working. Not because you're a bad mother. Not because you did something wrong, but because you've been dealing with the ego, not the real heart of your child. And the ego doesn't respond to softness. It responds to boundaries. You see, your adult child's biggest weakness is also your greatest opportunity. They expect you to be predictable, to always pick up the phone, to always agree, to always say yes, even when your heart says no. But what happens when you stop being predictable? What happens when you stop explaining yourself? What happens when you simply go quiet, not out of anger, but out of clarity? The ego doesn't know what to do. It loses its grip. It starts to panic, just a little, because for the first time, you're not playing by its rules. It's the power you hold, not through shouting, not through lecturing, but through choosing your responses carefully, calmly, with dignity. Imagine this: your child makes a snide comment during a visit. Instead of defending yourself, you simply smile gently, change the subject, or walk away. No reaction, no emotional reward, just silence. To the ego, that silence is deafening. It forces reflection. Or maybe they send you a vague, guilt-tripping text. Something like, "Well, I guess I'll see you if you're not too busy with your other kids." And instead of rushing to fix it, instead of explaining or apologizing, you pause. You wait. You let them sit with their own words. That pause, that lack of instant response, is powerful. It shifts the emotional balance back to you. This isn't about being manipulative. It's about reclaiming your dignity. It's about moving out of emotional survival mode and stepping into quiet authority. Because whether your child is 30 or 50, the relationship will not grow unless you stop feeding it from a place of fear and start leading from a place of strength. You've given so much already. Your love is not in question. What's needed now is your presence. Not the kind of presence that's always available, always agreeable, always waiting for a crumb of appreciation, but the kind of presence that says, without words, "I know my worth. I don't chase love. I don't beg for respect. I live it." And you do that, not by changing them, but by changing your energy. When you stop trying to be the good mother and start becoming the grounded woman, everything shifts. The power dynamic changes. Your child begins to feel the emotional difference. They may not say it out loud, but something inside them will take notice. The ego will resist at first. It may even push back. But over time, it will sense that the rules have changed. And when the ego senses change, it does something unexpected. It starts to adapt. Because deep down, even the most distant adult child still wants connection. But not with someone they feel they can control. They want connection with someone they respect. And respect isn't earned through self-sacrifice. It's earned through presence, boundaries, and the courage to be still. Let's pause here. Take a deep breath. You've already come this far in life. You've faced loss, hardship, joy, and pain. You are stronger than you know. And now you have the chance to bring that strength into your relationships. Not by saying more, but by doing less, with more intention. By fighting to be heard, but by choosing when to speak and when to simply rise above. You don't need to demand love from your child. You need to demand respect from yourself. Because once you give that to yourself, the world, and yes, even your grown child, begins to respond differently. And that, my friend, is where real change begins. Now let's go a little deeper, because this isn't just about silence or setting boundaries. It's about understanding how power works. Not the kind of power that dominates, but the kind that radiates from within. When your adult child's ego controls the emotional rhythm of the relationship, it's like they're holding the remote. They press a button. You react. They go silent. You get worried. They show affection. You feel relief. But what happens when you take back the remote? Not with words or threats, but with emotional discipline? You begin to control the rhythm. You decide when there is closeness and when there is distance. You become the one who responds, not reacts. And that, my dear, is emotional power. Your adult child may not realize it, but what they really crave isn't your approval or even your love. They already know they have those. What they crave on a deeper level is a feeling of significance. And when you've always been the one who gives, forgives, and reaches out, they start to believe that your world revolves around them, that they are the center, the sun, and you the planet. But what if one day you stopped orbiting? What if instead of waiting for their approval, You started investing more deeply in yourself, your joy, your interests, your peace of mind. What if you no longer chased their affection and instead became a source of calm, quiet strength? You would shift from being the mother they take for granted to the woman they can't stop thinking about. Not because you're manipulative, not because you're playing games, but because you've become emotionally unavailable in the most elegant, self-respecting way. And that's something the ego cannot ignore. There's something I want you to understand here, and it's important. When I say emotionally unavailable, I don't mean cold. I don't mean bitter. I mean selective, grounded, clear. You're still warm. You're still kind. But your emotional energy is no longer a faucet they can turn on and off. It's a well, deep, steady, and not easily accessed. This is where the first of your 3 psychological weapons comes in, though weapon may be too strong a word. Think of them as tools of emotional mastery. The first is emotional scarcity. It means your attention is not unlimited. Your time is not endless. Your affection is not automatic. You do not reward bad behavior with more effort. You let people earn your presence, not because you're cruel, but because you respect yourself. Now imagine this in action. Your child sends you a message that's vague, passive-aggressive, or half-hearted. Maybe it's a short reply to something thoughtful you sent. Maybe it's a guilt-tripping text. In the past, you might have jumped to respond, over-explained, or tried to smooth things over. But now, you pause. You don't rush. You might wait hours, or you might not respond at all. Why? Because silence in that moment speaks louder than anything you could say. It communicates that you don't reward confusion with clarity. You don't chase crumbs. You stand tall, emotionally and spiritually. Which brings us to the second psychological tool, selective silence. This is a subtle, powerful shift. You're not giving the cold shoulder. You're giving space. And space is where reflection happens. When you go silent, not in anger, but in intention, your child is left with themselves, their thoughts, their behavior, their own reflection. Suddenly, the echo chamber breaks. They no longer hear your reassurance, your validation, your readiness to please. And in that quiet, their ego gets uncomfortable. Why? Because it no longer feels in control. Let me tell you something from the heart. The people who expect you to always be available are the ones who've gotten used to your sacrifice. But when you stop overgiving, when you sit back and let your absence speak, they start to realize what your presence truly meant. And that leads us to the third and most graceful tool of all, strategic withdrawal. This is not disappearing. It's not cutting off. It's stepping back on purpose. Not because you're punishing them, but because you finally realize that your energy is precious. This might look like declining a phone call you're not emotionally ready for. It might mean skipping a visit that feels more like a performance than a connection. It might mean putting your phone on silent for a day, going for a walk, reading a book, visiting a friend, doing something that feeds you instead of draining you. When you do this, something remarkable happens. You stop chasing closeness and start choosing peace. And in doing so, you become, often without realizing it, the one they start to chase. Why? Because the ego doesn't value what it can control. It values what it can lose. It's strange, isn't it? How a mother's unconditional love, the very thing that raised them, becomes so invisible the moment they think they've got you figured out. But when you change the rhythm, when you become emotionally unpredictable in a graceful, grounded way, it throws off their expectations. They don't know what to do with your calm, your distance, your glow. And that glow, my friend, is everything. Because it doesn't come from them. It comes from you. You are no longer the woman who begs to be seen. You are the woman who sees herself fully, completely, and without apology. And that is exactly what they will begin to notice. Maybe not with words, maybe not at first, but in small moments, in quiet glances, in the way they start to check in more often, in the way their tone softens, in the way they begin to wonder, is she pulling away from me? That question, born not of fear, but of mystery, is the beginning of transformation. And here's what's most beautiful about all of this. You haven't lost your child. You've simply stepped out of the emotional shadow they were used to placing you in. You've let go of control, and in doing so, you've taken control of yourself. That's not rejection. That's rebirth. And it begins not with them, but with you. There's something almost magical that begins to happen when a woman who has always been available suddenly becomes emotionally steady and just a little mysterious. You start to notice it not just in your child's tone, but in how you carry yourself. You're not waiting on their call anymore. You're not wondering what mood they'll be in when they show up. You're not rehearsing what to say to avoid conflict. Something shifts inside you. And that shift, quiet as it may be, changes everything. Now let's talk about what happens next, because this is the part so few people prepare you for. The moment when your adult child realizes that they don't own your emotions anymore. When they feel, maybe for the first time in a long while, that you are no longer in their emotional grip, that your life is moving forward, with or without their approval. For some children, especially those ruled by ego, this moment feels like a crisis. Not because they've lost you entirely, but because they've lost control over the version of you they thought they had forever. And this is where your greatest power quietly unfolds. When you stop being the mother who pleads, apologizes, and waits, and start becoming the woman who leads with quiet strength. Something inside your child begins to stir. They may not understand it, but they feel it. You've become, in the best, most graceful way, unpredictable. And nothing stirs the ego like unpredictability. You see, the ego can't crave what it fully understands. It can't long for what it already possesses. But when you become a little harder to read, when you carry yourself with a calm, radiant presence that says, "I love you, but I don't need to chase you," you become unforgettable. There's an old truth. People don't remember every word you say, but they always remember how you made them feel. When you were the mother who always gave in, they may have felt power. But when you become the woman who no longer plays by the ego's rules, they feel respect. This doesn't mean being cold. In fact, warmth is still your greatest asset, but now it's intentional. Your smile, your presence, your time, they're offered from a full heart, not an empty need. You don't show up because you're afraid they'll stop loving you. You show up because you choose to. And that difference? It's everything. Now you might be wondering, will they even notice? Will they even care? Yes. They may not say it. Egos rarely do. But they'll feel it in their gut. They'll sense that something has changed, that they're no longer the center of your emotional world. And for an adult child who's grown used to your emotional dependence, this realization feels like a jolt to the system. That jolt, as unsettling as it may be for them, is the beginning of respect. And here's the truth. When you're respected, you're remembered. You're not just another voice in their life. You become the woman they measure others against. The one who didn't crumble under pressure. The one who didn't cry for attention. The one who stood tall in silence and let her dignity do the talking. This is what it means to become unforgettable. It's not about grand gestures. It's not about guilt or drama. It's about becoming so grounded in who you are that your very presence becomes a mirror. One that gently reflects back to your child where they need to grow. And here's the most beautiful part. The more you respect yourself, the more others begin to rise to meet that level. Even your child. Especially your child. But let's take this one step further. Because true transformation isn't just about what others see. It's about what you feel inside. There's a moment when all the silence, the restraint, the inner work stops feeling like a strategy and starts feeling like who you really are. That's the moment when you're no longer trying to master someone else's ego. You've mastered your own. You no longer see your worth through their behavior. You no longer rise and fall based on their tone or their texts or their visits. You know your value. You hold it close. And that self-respect becomes your new way of walking through the world. Something in your eyes changes. Something in your voice. You speak less, but your presence speaks more. You don't need to demand respect. You carry it with you. And that inner transformation is the greatest gift you'll ever give yourself. Now let me say something directly to you, woman to woman. You do not have to spend the rest of your life trying to fix a relationship that's only broken because someone else refuses to grow. You do not have to keep explaining yourself to someone who isn't listening. You do not have to carry guilt for choosing peace. Your job is not to make your child happy at your own expense. Your job is to live your life fully, with grace, with love, and with emotional self-control. And when you do that, when you choose calm over chaos, silence over struggle, self-respect over self-sacrifice, something beautiful happens. You begin to shine in a way that no one can dim, not even them. So live, not in waiting, not in hoping, but in fullness. Take the trip, start the garden, join the book club, go to lunch with friends who laugh with you. Get dressed for yourself, not for anyone's approval. Let your child see you thriving, not out of spite, but out of strength. Because when they do, when they see that your life didn't fall apart without them, but actually got better, they will feel it, deep in their core. They may not say it, but they'll feel it. And somewhere beneath all that ego, they will remember. You are not just their mother. You are a woman of worth. A woman they cannot control. A woman they'll never forget. And whether they return to you changed or not at all, you have already won. Because you didn't just reclaim your power. You reclaimed yourself. You know, there's something sacred about coming into this stage of life and realizing you survived everything. The heartbreaks, the setbacks, the disappointments, the years you gave to others while putting yourself last. And yet here you are, wiser, more powerful than you've likely ever been, even if you haven't fully felt it yet. This isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of the part where you stop living for everyone else's approval and start living with deep, quiet pride in who you've become. Especially as a mother, especially as a woman. For too long, you were taught that good mothers sacrifice, that good women hold their tongues, keep the peace, make excuses, and stay small so others don't feel uncomfortable. But now you understand the difference between love and submission, between support and self-erasure, between closeness and emotional dependency. You've learned that when you stop begging to be seen, you become radiant. When you stop explaining your worth, you begin to embody it. And when you stop chasing a child who runs hot and cold, you give them the space to realize that your presence was never guaranteed. That is the art of reversing emotional power, not to control others, but to reclaim yourself. Let's talk about what life looks like from this new place. Because what you're building now isn't just about your child, it's about you. Your peace, your joy, your sense of fulfillment. It's about becoming the kind of woman who doesn't just survive a difficult relationship, but flourishes beyond it. There's a lightness that comes when you stop trying to read between the lines of their texts. When you stop wondering, what did I do wrong? every time they withdraw. When you stop preparing for the next emotional ambush, and in that quiet, you begin to hear something else, your own voice, your own desires. The parts of you that have been patiently waiting to be rediscovered. Maybe it's the part of you that loves art, or music, or long walks in the morning. Maybe it's the dream you put on a shelf decades ago because life got busy and kids needed raising. Maybe it's your sense of humor, your curiosity, your quiet strength that never got a proper stage. Whatever it is, let it come back. Let it shine again. Because this transformation isn't about making your child come running back with tears and apologies. It's not about getting them to change overnight. It's about you changing so completely, so deeply, that no one can mistake your energy for weakness again. You're not the same woman who used to wait by the phone. You're not the same mother who said yes when her heart said no. You're not the same soul who thought her worth was defined by how needed she was. You are free now. And in your freedom, you become magnetic. Even if your child never says it, they will feel it. They will see your growth in how you speak, how you walk, how you glow from the inside out. And whether they admit it or not, something in them will shift. Maybe not today, maybe not this year, but the seed will be planted, and it will grow. That is your legacy now, not just what you gave to your children, but what you finally gave to yourself. And don't be surprised if one day in the quiet, they come back. Not because you chased them, not because you begged, but because your absence spoke a truth their ego couldn't ignore. Maybe they'll come with more softness, more respect, a different tone in their voice, or maybe they won't. But either way, you will be fine, more than fine. You will be rooted in something far stronger than anyone's approval, your own inner power, and no one can take that from you. So as you move forward from here, hold your head high, not because you've figured everything out, but because you've made the most important choice a woman can make. The choice to stop proving and start being. Being grounded, being radiant, being at peace, and being completely whole, no matter who shows up, who pulls away, who understands, or who never quite does. If you've made it to this point in your journey, I want to say this to you from the bottom of my heart. I see you. I honor your strength. And I hope you now see what was always there inside you. Not just the mother, but the masterpiece. Let that masterpiece shine. Let it lead. And let it live. Because you, my dear, are not just unforgettable to your child. You are unforgettable to the world. You are what power looks like when it grows from silence, from dignity, and from love. Not for someone else, but for yourself. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this spoke to your heart, I'd love for you to share your thoughts in the comments. You never know who else might read your words and feel less alone. And if you'd like more videos that speak to this season of life with honesty and hope, go ahead and subscribe to Strong Elderly Life. We're building a community here of strength, of support, and of second chances. Until next time, take care of your heart, honor your truth, and remember, you don't need to raise your voice to be powerful. You already are.